At 61, Jim Carrey sat down for what he called his final interview. The man who made millions laugh was ready to tell the truth. For decades, fans suspected something dark behind his manic energy. They were right. In 2025, Carrey revealed he'd been on Prozac since the 1980s, battling what he called low-level despair that never left. But that wasn't the shocking part. What he confessed about his father's suicide attempts and his own breaking point will change how you see every movie he ever made. Jim Carrey was born on January 17, 1962, in the small town of Newmarket, Ontario. He was the youngest of four, growing up in a noisy, cramped home where dreams and bills collided every month. His father, Percy, played the saxophone with a jazz band before settling for an accounting job at Titan Wheels in Scarborough, earning just $8,000 a year. His mother, Kathleen, fought illness all through his childhood, spending more days in bed than out of it. The family name had once been Kerr, before Percy's ancestors anglicized it after coming to Canada. Inside their modest home, Jim watched his father's quiet disappointment grow. Percy had the heart of a musician trapped behind a desk. And Jim saw early that even hard work didn't guarantee safety. When he turned 8, Jim found comfort in the mirror. He would stand there for hours, twisting his face into shapes that made even his siblings stop and stare. By 10, he was so confident that he mailed a letter to Carol Burnett telling her he was already a master of impressions. He got a polite form letter back, but to him it was everything. He taped it to his wall like a promise. At school, he couldn't help himself. He turned every class into a show, morphing into teachers and movie stars until the principal sent him out again and again. Kids called him Rubber Face. And for a boy living in constant financial strain, those laughs were gold. Then everything collapsed in 1975 when Titan Wheels shut down without warning. Percy was 51 and suddenly unemployed. He sent out 73 applications to accounting firms across Ontario and got nothing but rejections. The savings dried up fast, and Kathleen's medical bills ate whatever was left. Percy finally took a janitor job for $4 an hour cleaning toilets in the same kind of factory he'd once worked for as an accountant. Jim was 13 and watching the man he admired most mop the floors of men who used to shake his hand. The humiliation cut deep. Within months, they lost their home. From 1974 to 1976, the Carreys lived in a yellow Volkswagen camper van parked near Lake Ontario. Percy and Kathleen slept inside, while Jim and his brother John pitched a tent beside it through freezing Canadian nights. They woke up with frost on their sleeping bags and washed up in gas station sinks before school. Sometimes Jim scavenged expired sandwiches from dumpsters and warmed them over the van stove. Together, the family worked the night shift at a local factory, earning $32 for 8 hours of cleaning floors and bathrooms. Jim went to Aldershot High School during the day, half asleep, his clothes unwashed, and his mind numb. By 15, his mother's illness had worsened so much she couldn't walk on her own. Jim started missing classes, and by 16, he dropped out to work full-time, beside his father earning $4.25 an hour. He cleaned floors all night, came home at dawn, lifted his mother from bed, washed her, made her food, and sat by her side cracking jokes to make her laugh. Those jokes were how he stayed sane. Kathleen called him her little sunshine, but inside he was terrified. It went on for 2 long years until 1980. Then came the morning that changed everything. In 1982, Jim found his father unconscious in the bathroom. Percy had swallowed a bottle of pills. Jim was 20 and screaming into the phone for help as paramedics rushed him to Joseph Brant Hospital. They saved him by minutes. Later, Percy admitted he had tried twice before during the years they'd lived in the van. Jim carried that shock for the rest of his life, fearing that same darkness lived in him. It became the reason he worked so hard, the reason he could never stop. But even through all that pain, something inside him kept whispering to try again. When he was 15, Percy had driven him to Toronto's Yuck Yucks Comedy Club for his first real show. His mother had picked out a bright polyester leisure suit, convinced that's what comedians wore on TV. The act bombed. People barely clapped. But Percy, even in all his disappointment, drove him home with quiet pride. Jim learned then that failing on stage wasn't death, it was training. On his 16th birthday, he quit school completely. The family was still broke, and everyone worked factory or janitor shifts to survive. Jim did 12-hour nights, sleeping in the van between shifts, dreaming of lights and applause. He started sneaking in comedy practice on breaks, mimicking Don Adams and W.C. Fields to keep his mind alive. He had once been a straight-A student, now angry and withdrawn. But comedy gave him a reason to breathe. The family began to fall apart under the weight of all that poverty. His siblings scattered. His father sank deeper into depression, and his mother's painkiller use became an addiction. Jim later said, "If you're high on painkillers, that's abandonment." He would sit at the dinner table listening to her say things like, "My brain is deteriorating at an incredible rate," or "I could go at any time." Those words carved themselves into him. He learned to use laughter as armor to hide pain behind absurdity. At 17, he finally made $20 for a 20-minute set at a club called the Hoft. It wasn't much, but it was proof he could earn with his jokes. Then he auditioned for Saturday Night Live in 1980, thinking he'd made it. But he never even got to meet Lorne Michaels. The producers passed on him, saying, "I don't think Lorne would like it." He was crushed. That rejection burned for years, but it also pushed him to stop copying others and start inventing his own characters. Behind his humor were invisible wounds. He'd been bullied at school for being poor, mocked for his clothes, sometimes so desperate he'd hurt himself just to feel something real. Years later, he talked about those moments in a documentary that showed footage so raw, producers kept it locked away for almost 20 years. His pain became the engine of his art. Every wild expression, every flailing movement came from a boy who had learned to survive by making people laugh. Through all the chaos, there were still glimpses of hope. Teachers at Aldershot High School sometimes let him perform in class instead of punishing him. One art teacher remembered him sketching and doing John Wayne impressions at the same time. In 1981, when he was 19, he landed his first TV role in a small Canadian movie called Introducing Janet, later renamed Rubberface. He played a struggling comedian named Tony, almost a mirror of himself. It didn't make him famous, but it gave him a start. That same year, he took a leap. With only $200 in his pocket, he left Toronto for Los Angeles. He slept on couches in comedy clubs and lived on free food, auditioning anywhere he could. By 1982, he was performing at the Comedy Store, the same place legends like Richard Pryor and Robin Williams had ruled. One night, Rodney Dangerfield saw him, liked him, and invited him on his 1980-1983 tour. Jim was the youngest of the group, opening shows in front of thousands, yet still scraping together enough to eat once a day. The hunger never left him, but now it had purpose. He got small parts on TV after that, barely paid, but each one mattered. In 1983, he earned just $50 a week doing sketches in a show called the Sex and Violence Family Hour. He slept in an empty apartment with no furniture and survived on ramen noodles. In 1984, he landed a sitcom, The Duck Factory, about a cartoon studio, but it was canceled after 13 episodes. He fell into debt again. Still, he refused to give up. In 1985, he got his first taste of success with the film Once Bitten, earning $19 million on a $1.5 million budget. Critics didn't love it, but people noticed him. The rubber-faced kid from Ontario was suddenly on the radar. Around that same time, his life veered off course again. An arrest for marijuana possession, a brief affair with Mia Farrow, and a growing dependence on cocaine to keep going through all-night rehearsals. He called that era one of his darkest. Still, he kept showing up, pushing through each audition, each rejection. He tried out for Saturday Night Live 3 separate times in 1980, 1983, and 1986, and was rejected every single one. His final audition failed after a Robin Williams impression fell flat. Instead of quitting, he reinvented himself. He began developing strange, exaggerated characters that no one else would dare attempt. One of them was Fire Marshal Bill, the wild man who would later define his breakout years. Those failures had carved him into something new. In 1990, Jim Carrey was 28 years old when he joined In Living Color, a Fox sketch show that didn't just push boundaries, it erased them. From the moment he walked on stage, his energy didn't match anyone else's. He created more than 120 sketches over 5 seasons. But one character, Fire Marshal Bill, blew up fast with a melted face, manic stare, and the wild catchphrase, "You can call me Bill." He made people laugh and squirm at the same time. It wasn't just funny, it was unforgettable. The show started pulling in millions, and Jim's bits were the ones people remembered most. It was the first time a white comedian became the breakout star of a show built around black comedy legends like the Wayans brothers. Carrey didn't just blend in, he broke out. But behind the scenes, he was going too hard. To play characters like Vera Demo, a grotesque female bodybuilder, or Ice-T parodies, Carrey changed his weight constantly, gaining or losing 20 pounds in a week. He was using his body like a prop. He'd slap himself, bend in ways that looked painful, smash into furniture just to get a laugh. Critics started whispering about Emmy potential, but his own body started breaking down. During one sketch in 1992, he twisted his ankle while dancing and had to shoot the rest of the week in pain. Even then, he didn't stop. He was getting $25,000 per episode and had just bought his first house in Los Angeles. But to keep going, he started relying on Adderall. It helped him stay awake through the brutal 80-hour weeks, but it was also pulling him apart inside. At the same time, his marriage was cracking. He had met Melissa Walmer in 1987 on the set of The Duck Factory. She saw him before the fame. But once In Living Color took off, everything changed. Fame filled the house. Late nights, strip clubs, lies. In 1995, she filed for divorce. She said he cheated with strippers, that he wasn't the same man anymore. And the court documents told the whole story. Too much success, too little balance. The audience laughed while his marriage fell apart. Even the content of the show got tangled in bigger problems. During the 1990-1993 seasons, the sketches pushed the line so far that Fox panicked. One segment called Homeboys, mocking gang culture, pulled in over 10 million viewers, but also triggered complaints. Executives started fighting the creators over what could air. Carrey didn't hold back either. He leaned into the chaos, mocking everything from race to religion. But after years of fighting, he finally